But that doesn't mean I'm going to hold my tongue about what I think is wrong about the left. And I don't. And there's a lot. And old school liberal, I could give you so many examples. It's a very big part of the show where I'm talking about the fact that people somehow think that wokeness is an extension of liberalism, when very often it's the opposite of liberalism. I mean, just like the Israel situation, the liberal position has always been a two-state solution. I still think that's the solution. Well, that's not the position of the woke. They want from the river to the sea. So you can have that position, but don't tell me that's the liberal.
Bill Maher keeps dropping truth bombs on the left, and they're reaching their breaking point. At this rate, it feels inevitable that Ma will drift from the left, settle in the center, and maybe even slide toward the right. His own side keeps attacking him for calling them out, but Ma refuses to retreat. This time, he came armed with real fire. So let's get straight into what went down.
If you're still brooding about the election, you're in the wrong building. I'm here just to make you laugh, and I'm not going to pre-hate anything that hasn't happened yet. And also look around. Are you really suffering that much? Now, Trump, could he blow up the world on the second day? Yeah, he could. But until he does, I'm not going to chase every crazy thing he does, and I'm not going to get upset about things that haven't happened yet.
Ma has repeatedly said he won't pre-hate anything, and he continues to stand firmly by that principle. He refuses to join the outrage mob before the facts are known, a discipline that's become almost extinct in modern politics. Ma has criticized President Trump for years, going all the way back to Trump's first days in office. But his criticisms have always been rooted in actual actions, not hypothetical fears or emotional overreactions. That's exactly where he differs from many in his own party. While other Democrats leap to conclusions at the mere mention of Trump's name, Ma insists on dealing with what Trump does, not what people imagine he might do. It's a rare, grounded approach.
And when I look around, America is, it's a place with a lot of problems. But also, compared to the rest of the world, it's doing better than most places. And, a lot of people are just living their best lives.
Are you this way, period, or did it take you a little while to get to this point after the election?
No, I mean, I was ready for Trump to win. I thought that she would win. I thought that America always basically moves forward and not backward, but I was wrong. I was certainly not surprised because I did not think she was a great candidate.
And that's Ma's honest observation, when many Democrats still refuse to accept. It's far easier for them to blame misinformation, sexism, or voter ignorance than to confront the uncomfortable reality in front of them. Kamala Harris, despite massive Hollywood backing and non-stop A-list endorsements, simply wasn't a strong candidate. Celebrity support can create noise, but it can't manufacture enthusiasm or trust. Voters saw through the glossy presentation and noticed the gap between her polished image and her actual performance. Ma's point is simple: elections aren't won by hype alone. At the end of the day, the candidate must be genuinely compelling, and Harris never met that bar, no matter how much star power surrounded her.
How difficult, if difficult at all, has it been for you to deal with some of the things that have been thrown in your direction just because you were on your show telling the truth about what the left did wrong and how it got in its own way and what it needed to do to fix the party? Your thoughts?
Stephen A., you can't have everything. That's what you come to if you live long enough. Would I like to have everybody on my side? Would I like to have everybody be my fan? Of course. Was it not great when some super woke people left because I wasn't on their page? Yeah. I wish everybody was still my fan, but you can't have that. Do I think I deserve a bunch of Emmys that I would never get because this town is woker than I?
Often explains what happens when his own side turns on him simply because he dared to criticize them, and it's genuinely fascinating. He doesn't pretend the backlash doesn't bother him. He admits it hurts, especially when it comes from people who claim to be allies. But Ma also understands a deeper truth many people ignore. Everyone secretly wants universal approval. We cling to the fantasy that everyone should automatically agree with whatever we say. But that expectation is unrealistic. People think independently, form their own judgments, and won't always align with us. Ma accepts that reality, And because of that acceptance, he refuses to silence himself just to fit in or avoid conflict.
I would take a million times if you offered it to me against those things. The joy of being able to speak my mind as I see it, and the love that gets me from people, from all stripes, who appreciate that. The things that people say to me. I've been out with every type of celebrity. They don't say the things they say to me to other celebrities. That means more to me than anything. But things that people say to me and how much it means to them, that they feel like there's somebody out there who is never pulling a punch and who will just call out anybody wherever they are.
And that's exactly why people respect Maher. He doesn't pander, soften his arguments, or reshape his views just to satisfy a particular crowd. He calls out anyone he believes is wrong, regardless of political party, status, or cultural alignment. In a media world where most talk show hosts only mock the opposing side while protecting their own ideological tribe, Ma stands out as a true exception. Most entertainers play it safe, pretending to be bold while only attacking convenient targets. But Ma is a different breed entirely. He's willing to anger his own supporters, challenge his own side's narratives, and absorb the backlash that comes with it. That independence is exactly what keeps him influential and respected.
Free speech guy. You know, I believe not in absolute free speech. That's not even in the Constitution. And of course, we have the example of, yelling fire in a crowded theater and so forth. There are things that you can't do. But I think he's basically right. We've gone way too far toward whose facts? I mean, COVID was a perfect example of this. And I think that's something that really opened a lot of people's eyes to what's going on with censorship in this country. We were not allowed to really discuss this. And it was a new phenomenon, this new pathogen we had. It should have been discussed. We're finding out now, as each week rolls by, more and more, it's pretty obvious that COVID, the origin of it was the lab.
When Ma was asked about Mark Zuckerberg's decision not to fact-check every post on Meta's platforms, he welcomed it as a necessary and gutsy move. In an era where tech companies are pressured to act as moral referees for the entire internet, Ma sees Zuckerberg's stance as a pushback against the expanding demand for censorship disguised as public safety. Ma has always been a strong, unapologetic defender of free speech, a principle he views as central to the Constitution and vital to a functioning democracy. To him, freedom of expression isn't a privilege, it's the foundation of open society. Ma repeatedly argues that the best weapon against bad ideas is better ideas, stronger reasoning, clearer arguments, and more open debate. Silencing people doesn't change their beliefs, it simply pushes them underground where they grow without challenge. Sunlight, he says, not suppression, is what exposes nonsense and weak arguments. On this, he's absolutely right. Free societies thrive when all voices can be heard, not when a select group decides which opinions are allowed to exist.
I think in 50 years, when people look back, they'll say, wait a second, there was a lab in Wuhan where the disease started that was studying this disease and using gain-of-function research on it, and they were debating whether this was the cause of it. Now, it could have been the wet markets. Absolutely. We don't know for sure. But the fact that we weren't even allowed to discuss that it was coming from a lab, which again, it probably was, now we know, that should tell you all you need to know. The fact that Justin Trudeau just stepped down in Canada, I mean, this guy had a very high approval rating 5 years ago, and he left really very unpopular because Canada became that kind of place where you really did not have the kind of free speech we do, and many other countries in Europe.
And that's the true danger of censoring free speech. When open discussion is shut down, the truth becomes the first casualty. Look at the early days of COVID. If people had been allowed to openly debate the origins of the virus on social media, without being labeled conspiracy theorists or having their posts deleted, we might have uncovered critical information far sooner. Instead, one narrative was aggressively protected while every alternative was silenced. And years later, many finally realized the lab leak theory wasn't misinformation at all, but a legitimate possibility that deserved serious examination. Censorship doesn't just suppress harmful ideas, it can also bury facts, evidence, and uncomfortable realities. When certain topics become untouchable, society doesn't become safer, it becomes more blind. By preventing people from speaking freely, we risk covering up the truth rather than revealing it. Healthy democracies depend on debate, skepticism, and the freedom to question authority. The moment we restrict those rights, we create a culture where mistakes go unchallenged, leaders go unchecked, and the truth becomes whatever the most powerful voice decides it should be.
This is part of what Mark Zuckerberg was talking about. We don't want to become like these countries in Europe where they have rules about what you can say that's going to be censored simply because it's hurting somebody's feelings. You know, you can't say something about Islam because it's Islamophobia. But what if it's true? You know, we just had a terrible incident in New Orleans that was a jihadist attack. We want to be able to speak about that plainly and honestly without worrying somebody's going to say, don't say that because it's not all Muslims. Well, no one's saying it's all Muslims. We're saying we need to discuss about this honestly and openly and patently, and you can't do that if somebody's looking over your shoulder and saying, well, this is going to hurt somebody's feelings.
Free speech doesn't exist to protect your feelings. It exists to protect the truth. That's the uncomfortable reality many still refuse to accept. Across Europe and increasingly in America, we've reached a point where certain topics have been turned into cultural landmines. Powerful institutions, political groups, and influential organizations have become virtually untouchable. Even mild criticism triggers outrage, labeling, or coordinated attempts to silence the speaker. But pretending these institutions are immune to scrutiny doesn't make the problems disappear. Many of them wield enormous influence over politics, culture, media, and public life, shaping society in ways no ordinary citizen ever agreed to. And yet almost nobody wants to speak about it openly. Fear has replaced honesty. Silence has replaced critical thought. This is exactly why free speech matters. It allows us to question power, challenge dominant narratives, and shine a light on behavior that affects millions. When certain groups become shielded from criticism, society grows weaker, not stronger. Truth can only thrive in open dialogue, not in whispered conversations behind closed doors. A healthy culture demands the freedom to question everything, even the institutions that claim to be beyond questioning.
But that doesn't mean I'm going to hold my tongue about what I think is wrong about the left. And I don't. And there's a lot. And old school liberal, I could give you so many examples. It's a very big part of the show where I'm talking about the fact that people somehow think that wokeness is an extension of liberalism, when very often it's the opposite of liberalism. I mean, just like the Israel situation, the liberal position has always been a two-state solution. I still think that's the solution. Well, that's not the position of the woke. They want from the river to the sea. So you can have that position, but don't tell me that's the liberal position.
Ma then launches into a full-on rant, drawing a sharp line between the woke movement and traditional liberals. To him, these two groups aren't just different, they're polar opposites. Old-school liberals believed in debate, personal freedom, tolerance, and the constant testing of ideas. The woke movement, he argues, has abandoned these ideals entirely, replacing them with purity tests, moral policing, and perpetual outrage. Ma warns that the woke ideology has drifted so far from genuine liberalism that it now threatens to pull the entire country into chaos if left unchecked. Their obsession with identity politics, hostility toward dissent, and growing attempts to control speech and thought all spell long-term trouble. In his view, this isn't just annoying or misguided, it's outright dangerous. Ma believes the movement must be called out and stopped before it becomes the dominant cultural force. Because when activism transforms into authoritarianism and progress turns into policing, the outcome isn't justice, it's collapse. And if no one is willing to speak up, the consequences could reshape the entire nation.
Is to cross the line. That's what a stand-up comedian's job. Not all stand-up, not all comedy. Some comedy's just silly, but not mine. So, you know, how do you know where the line is until people like me cross it to a degree? I'm never upset when people in the audience recoil. You know, I don't want to make the whole show recoiling. You want to be popular. But there's a couple of times in the show where people just are like, ugh. You know, I mean, we were just talking about the Israel situation. There's a line in there where I say, you know, really? Marching for Hamas? You're marching for terrorist groups? It's like rooting for the planes on 9/11.
What makes Bill Maher so compelling is his unwavering commitment to telling the truth, no matter who ends up offended. He refuses to pander to audiences, celebrities, or political allies, holding everyone, including himself, accountable. Whether he's criticizing President Trump based on actions rather than assumptions, defending free speech against rising censorship, or calling out the excesses of the woke movement, Ma consistently prioritizes honesty over popularity. He understands that silencing debate doesn't solve problems, it only buries the truth. He sees the danger in allowing unchecked influence or ideological extremism to dominate public discourse, whether through politics, social media, or cultural pressure. Ma's independence, clarity, and courage make him a rare voice in today's polarized world. Love him or hate him, Ma forces people to confront uncomfortable truths, challenge their assumptions, and engage with ideas on substance rather than spectacle. In a world saturated with noise, his voice cuts through with fearless clarity.